Hi, everybody. How's everyone doing tonight?
Good, except that I plan to be early.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I think the rule is it used to take 10 minutes to get anywhere in town. Now give yourself one.
Yeah, I just learned that just now.
Okay, we've got fun stuff tonight. I'm gonna go through over the website really quick here. And then we have a couple of people who are gonna talk about some stuff going on in the world. And then we've got a featured reader and we have our presenter. Come on in. So I am sharing our landing page for Central Oregon Writers Guild. Right there at the top, the Central Oregon Writers Guild anthologies, 2022, 2023, 2024 are all available at Roundabout and Amazon. 2025 will be coming out in November, and we are still taking submissions for the anthology. So if you don't have it in, just click on this member anthology, COWG member anthology tab up here. And it gives you all the details. We're taking submissions through May 31st for that. Okay, there's on the left side of the page here, we have all the events that we're doing. There's Kim, who's joining us this evening. This Saturday, from 1 to 4, Bola Badabo is doing a haiku workshop, and that's at East Bend Library. So remember, we usually do them in here, but this one's going to be at East Bend Library. There are still spots to sign up for that. That should be super fun. June, we've got Laura Stanfield coming to be our speaker, and she's also doing a workshop. July, we have Meg Fancher. August, we have Grace Bielecki, who's done several events here at the library, and I'm hearing great things about it. I haven't been to them. September, we have Jennifer Perrine, who's also going to do the workshop in September. October, Deborah Phrase.
Isn't that perfect for an editor and
it is.
Executive editor? Her last name is Phrase.
Then Sherry Kephart, also doing a workshop in November, and then in December we have our holiday potluck. Down at the very bottom here, we have recordings of all the meetings since the beginning of COVID. So we started doing meetings online, and we recorded them, and we just continued recording them. So if you want to go look back, right side of the page, we have all of the writing events that we know of in Central Oregon. So we're doing quiet writing on Tuesday mornings, every Tuesday morning, 9:30 to 11, upstairs here at the Hutchinson room. We usually have anywhere from 5 to 10 people in there. And what we do is we talk for about 15 minutes about writing and cool stuff. And then we just write for an hour and 15 minutes. And I got a lot done this morning.
Nice.
COCC Barber Library also has writing. And Cavista Coffee, it looks like they've changed their name to Fern and Fox and Fern, so I'll have to change that. I'm assuming that they're continuing the quiet writing.
Are they owned by different people now?
I have no idea. I just drove past.
Idaho, and they took Cavista with them. So they opened in Eagle, Idaho, and the new group. I don't know anything about the new owners. I saw the name change. So.
Yeah, I'll check to make sure that they're still doing it. Yeah. Okay, so let's see what else we've got. What is today? 13th. So tomorrow, Crane is doing a poetry play shop. There's a how to write, publish, and market your children's book at here at the Bend Library. Some author readings. Third Thursday spoken word here and in Redmond. The haiku workshop with Bola. More authors. Blank Pages Writing Salon, which is an online writing salon. We meet the third Thursday of every month. Basically, we provide a little prompt, which you can write to or not. Do some quick shares, give each other praise. Randy, how great is it?
It's super
it's
fun.
Wonderful.
I've been out of town for a long time, but it's really fun.
But they're fun. let's see, Magic of Spring, Poetry Workshop, Jane Kirkpatrick at Polina Springs. What else? More stuff with Krina. Publishing with Substack, that's at COCC. Craig Johnson, Longmire, is that right? Yeah, the Longmire books, he's gonna be at Sun River Books. Polina Springs has a poetry gathering the beginning of every month. What else? Raging Writers is the second Sunday of every month at Sport. And my wife Irene and Bim, his last name I can't think of right now. They do poetry prompts. We do some writing, and then they do a reading. So you can read or not. It's great. It's fun. It's at Sport. They close. Sport is closed down for that. And so on and so forth. Right. I think most everything is in there. We have stuff coming up. If you look down here on this bottom part, we have got a writing conference coming to Central Oregon. Before Trish shares about that, I'm going to have Craig Bruner talk to us about the Ellipse Theater Company that is doing Cheryl Strait's Tiny Beautiful Things, and there's a writing component to it that Craig's going to tell us about.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Again, my name is Craig Bronner. I have a distinct pleasure of working with Mike and Irene over at OSU Cascades. You couldn't tell by the orange and the beaver. But also, yes, I am a president and founding member of Ellipse Theater Community. Maybe you've seen some of our shows, maybe not. But what's unique about Ellipse Theater Community is one of our productions programs is our ETC Roadshow, and where we take shows and we tour them throughout Central Oregon. So with Tiny Beautiful Things, we actually opened up this past weekend in Bend at Open Space Event Studios. And then we did 2 performances in Redmond over at the High Desert Music Hall. And then this weekend we'll be at Sisters Firehouse, and then we'll go to Prineville at the Bowman Museum. And then we're capping off our tour on May 30th and May 31st back at OSU Cascades here in Bend. But I've been collaborating with Mike and Irene about various activities that we could do alongside the production. And one of those was an anonymous letter writing project. So with Tiny Beautiful Things, this is based off of Cheryl Strait's work when she was writing as an anonymous advice columnist for the Dear Sugar column. And she received just the most heart-wrenching, open, vulnerable letters from people that she never knew. But she also, in her responses and her very specific writing style, responded to those with her coined phrase of radical empathy and vulnerability. So here, what we're doing with the production is we have the Tiny Beautiful Letter Project, where we are accepting anonymous letters. And surprising to me, what I thought was just going to be based here in the local community, I guess word has gotten out and shared amongst people. But so far, I've received letters from Indiana, California, Montana, Washington. I've actually received more letters outside of the state of Oregon than I've received in the state of Oregon. But I especially would really love to have more local voices, more Oregon voices a part of this. And then also unique to this project is that on May 28th, on Wednesday, May 28th, from 7 to 8:30, we're hosting a free event at the Scale House Gallery. So not too far from here, where we will take select anonymous letters and we'll actually be reading them out loud. I have a couple posters. I also have some palm cards. But you can find us at etcbend.org or our social media handles at etcbend.org. But tickets are fairly cheap. We're trying to keep the arts as accessible as possible at $20 per ticket. I think a really good compliment I received was, this was the best $20 I spent. So I would just appreciate your, you in the audience, your submission, or just even helping me spread the word. But it's an honor to work with Mike, and it's an honor to be here today, and I appreciate you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
What exactly is an anonymous letter?
So the question was, the question was, what exactly is the anonymous letter? So Mike, I'll follow up over email. I'll send you the direct link. But we have a submission form, and really specifically what we're looking for in an anonymous letter are really topics that kind of deal with the subject matter of the show. So vulnerability, loss, love, grief. An example of some of the letters, like I'll share, the one I wrote was actually to a college friend of mine who actually lost his life. So I wrote a letter to him. Another example of a letter that I've received is a woman writing a letter to her daughter that she miscarried. We've also received letters of a humorous one, I would say, is somebody that wrote a letter that was saying sorry to the various people that they stole from. So I think it starts, I don't want to spoil it, but it is pretty funny. Like, to my third grade teacher, I stole your stapler. To my neighbor, I stole your VHS of The Sound of Music. So it's very open. So one even did one as like a sonnet of sorts. So you can be pretty creative with it. Thank you.
Thanks, Bree.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I'll send an email out to the Writers Guild mailing list with more details on that. Send that to me, Craig. So, okay.
Thank you.
All right,
I'm up,
you're up.
I'm up. Okay. So I missed you guys. I've been gone for 6 months, so I'm really glad to see everybody. And ta-da, finally, we have a Central Oregon Writers Conference. Boy, I knew this would be a lot of work. I had no idea. You know, when you know that something is going to be a big project and you do it and you think, wow, this is going to be a big project, but it'll be fun. I have to say it's been a blast. So far, we're having a really good time. Now that we finally got a place at the River House Lodge, which is like the perfect place for us to have this. So we're really excited about it. And we have early registration until July 1st. Raise your hand if you've ever been to a conference. You've been to a full-on writers conference. Put your thumb up if you felt like you got a lot out of it, your thumb to the side if you're not really sure, thumb down if you just felt like you were kind of lost.
You tell Trish teaches.
Well, and right. Well, it's participation, right? And then I get to see what's going on with you. So here's the thing, and a lot of writers conferences for me, I started off, and granted, I was living in San Diego at the time, and the conferences were huge, and I felt completely lost. And then I ran into the Southern California Writers Conference in San Diego. They only take about 200 people tops. At this one, we're only going to take 115 tops, because then the workshops are smaller. You get to actually talk to the workshop leaders, and we're going to have people there from the industry. So if you want to improve your craft, you want to understand what next steps are, and we have just some really fun people. Some of the rock stars from San Diego, LA, you know, the conferences from LA are coming up. And then we have some really great Oregon's own amazing people who are going to be workshop leaders here, and we're going to do advanced submissions. We do this really fun thing called First Page Cage Match. So if you're coming to the conference and you have a novel or a nonfiction piece, something that you've been working on, really get that first page in the best possible shape you can. And what we do, it's kind of like a gong show. We read each first page that people submit out loud. And then if the, agents, editors, independent publishers, whoever is there in that group, if they have them do the gong, they say exactly what doesn't work for them and how to fix it. A lot of times we have great stuff going, but there's just some small thing that we just don't know how to fix. So, and there will also be advanced submissions. Like if you want to send the first 10 pages of something that you're working on, you can send that to one of the experts. You get to choose whichever expert you want. They're all listed on the website. And if you go to the website at CentralOregonWritersConference.com, can you put that up? Is that possible? Ta-da, there it is. And you click on the top corner, your workshop journey.
Your weekend journey?
I'm sorry, your weekend journey. I can't see worth a darn
Okay,
anymore.
yeah.
These are trifocals, what can I tell you?
Oh, and.
Huh?
Why it's not going? My computer doesn't want to play.
Well, anyway, there's a list, we don't have the schedule up yet, because we're still kind of juggling things around, moving things around on the grid to keep it really balanced. Because there will be at least 3 workshops at a time. If we have more people sign up, then we'll have 4 workshops at a time. But right now we have 24 really great workshops for everyone who's coming from writing craft to, editing tricks to how to pitch your book, just all the things. We have a self-published writer that's coming, that she's very successful, makes a good living as a self-published writer, and she's coming to try to, to tell people, these are some of the inside things that I learned the hard way. So that we don't have to learn everything the hard way. And then if you want to do traditional publishing, we also have somebody coming that she is going to talk about what works and what doesn't. She's actually an editor here in our midst, who Dory, who actually works as an editor for a traditional publishing house. So, I mean, just all kinds of really cool things. So I really hope you, and one more thing, by July 1st, if you sign up before July 1st, it only gives you a couple of weeks. But there's a $50 discount right now. And then because you're members of or you come to the Central Oregon Writers Guild, you get another $50 off. So it's $100 off, which makes it less expensive than almost any other conference around that you would go to. Yes.
You said 2 weeks and then you said July 1st.
So
Did you mean June or is it July?
No, it's July 1st.
no, it's July 1st. I'm sorry, 6 weeks. It's 6 weeks. I was panicking this morning going, oh my gosh, we're running out of time. And you're right, it's 6 weeks, not 2. Thank you for saying that. Yes.
The dates and the cost.
The dates are October 17th through 19th. And the cost, if you sign up before July 1st, is $395. And it includes a banquet too, and 2 really cool speakers. I can't tell you who they are now because we're still finalizing things, but I'm really excited about them. So I should be able to tell you by the next guild meeting, and it will be posted on the website when we solidify it. And hopefully by the end of this month, or maybe a couple weeks later, we'll have the grid all figured out on where so you'll get to actually see the schedule. Part of my frustration in a lot of the other really big conferences is they don't give you a lot of information on what's happening where. Whereas in our conferences, because I've done this with Michael several times in San Diego and Irvine, is he has it all set up so that you can see what the workshops are, and who's teaching them, and look at it ahead of time and think of what you want to do. And I mean, it's just really cool. So are there, so $395 if you sign up before, then it's $495 if you don't take advantage of any of the discounts. So it's $100.
So there's a
more.
$50 Central Oregon Writers Guild discount plus a $50 early bird discount.
And you got the code in the last email that Mike sent. So if you don't know where that email is that Mike sent, please contact us so that we can give you that code so you get the additional $50 off. Because, hey, you deserve it. You're part of this community. Do you remember what it was off the top of your head? It's COWG Guild, I think. So it's capital C, capital O, capital W, capital G, and then small lowercase guild,
I think
right?
that's right, yeah.
UIL, or 2 G's or 1?
No, COWG and then UILD, but the UILD is lowercase. And that'll give you an additional $50 off. And so worth it. I mean, the first time I went to one of these things in San Diego, I was just going to one of these things, and I went from being completely overwhelmed and feeling like a total failure from the first conference that I went to, where there were a bazillion people and they made it sound like everything was just in the too hard basket, to here are specific things to do. Here's some brand new tools that you can take home and actually use to improve your writing, to know kind of the ins and outs of how the whole system works. And here are some resources and people you can get in touch with after the conference. I have people get in touch with me after my workshops all the time. They come, can you look at this one more time and see, you know, that kind of thing. So are there any questions? No, we're good. Okay, well, thanks for your time.
Thanks.
And I hope to see you in October.
Sarah,
She wanted to mention that there's a, I put this in the upcoming events, but, there's a Three Sisters backpacking poetry event in July 17th through 20th. If people are interested, but, she was gonna talk about it. She might be able to come next month and talk about it. Any other stuff coming up or amazing things that have happened to anyone?
Our member Linda Sather is gonna be at the Redmond Senior Center on May 21st at 2:30, giving a book talk on her Smack of Jellyfish book.
Cool. And then
I went to the one on that in Redmond. It's really fun. So if you have that, day free.
And then if you want to go to Petersburg, Alaska, she's also doing it up
On
there.
this
That's this Thursday. Which is where the book is based. Anybody else? Any other cool stuff? No? Okay, all right. Mary Krakow is our featured reader coordinator, who is going to come and introduce our featured reader tonight.
Easiest job on the planet. You get people to come and do the work. No, okay. Okay, so right. So each month we invite one of our readers, one of our members to come up and read something they're working on or something that they have worked on in this supportive environment. And today's reader is Andrew J. Smiley. He is a middle school language arts teacher and resident of Central Oregon for the last 15 years with his wife and 3 children, though he is a native to New England and its glorious winters. He is usually pounding away at the anvil of his craft, creating YA fantasy worlds, but in his downtime, he can be found watching anime, playing video games, exploring dark corners, and tinkering with Gundam models at the dining room table. He will be reading a short piece from his project in the Forge writing workshop. Andrew, come on up.
All right, well, you can tell from that bio that I don't have a lot of mature, responsible thoughts, so just got a little section from the opening of the project I've been working with in the Forge, great program. I write a young adult fantasy, so not a lot of genre breaking in what I'm gonna read, but it's fun, so I like to do it. This is titled Alchemy, subtitled Smells. This takes place in Eden, the Fledgethon Alchemy Crucible. A huge lion was prowling back and forth along the edge of the pane of burning red energy holding him prisoner. His jaws were parted and his long dark brown mane rippled with his constant movement. He had been taken from his previous prison to this new, worse one. There was no familiar stink of the circular fighting place here, no smells of meat and sweat and blood. There was no sting of the lash or pokes from shining sticks wielded by the men that kept him and fed him and left him with rewards when he did as they wanted, or delivered pain when he did not. But there was, from the enclosures nearby, primal waft scent that spoke of other prisoners here. The cold resignation of the serpent, the prickling indignation of the armored one with the mighty sting, and the winged drake's desperation to be shielded from the false sun in the room, giving off the dry humming of a hornet's nest. As he slumped back and forth in a looping metronome along the wall of red energy, the lion kept his eyes locked on the most significant threat he could perceive. A trio of men, tall and dark. He could hear their voices, though none of their words sounded familiar from what he had learned in his previous prison. Most impressive, very rare, quite particular, the serpent especially. She has fine Lamia architecture. Are these beasts meant to battle, Director? Perhaps for a genomic fitness trial? Or, interjected the first speaker with an oily, eager voice, Are they specimens meant for our use in the rebus vats? The lion continued his pace, the thick muscles of his shoulders and back pinching and bunching beneath his pelt. He watched as the three men continued to speak, waiting for the moment when the wall of pain might flicker, for the instant the curtain might be drawn away and he might bounce. Smell of steel, smell of fear, of coming danger, smell of urine and bile, mixtures of suffering, ready to run. Wait, watch. The consultation of men continued beyond the layered walls of fire. Now, my esteemed colleagues, the question is this. What do all these fine faunae have in common? Very little, considering their natural orders, Director. Each one persists in a separate sphere of animalia. Each breeds, consumes food, mates to reproduce. Beyond that, they care nothing for the others. Each one is its own master, Director, at the peak of his food chain, a consumer of flesh and an eater of man. The lion could feel the exhalations from the other captives in their enclosures vibrating with pain and panic. He prowled on, waiting for the moment to strike out and free himself from his prison. His thick lips lifted over the long curved knives of his teeth as rancor rolled up from his lungs. He swatted at the wall of invisible fire again, his claws leaving crackling streaks that bit him up to the shoulder. Then we are to reforge the legendary chimera? Yes, correct. And these 4 offerings shall be the building blocks. What we're hoping to create here will surely suffer from a relatively short lifespan, which is unfortunate considering the energy and material demands of its construction. Each part will surely be in conflict with the other, and each part will slowly poison the whole like a cancerous graft. It will be a fierce and terrible beast, true, but only potent for a limited time. There was a cold, bitter emanation palpable from the 3 men in the conference behind their clear barriers. The lion could sense their malevolence in the vibrations of their speech and the sense of their intent. His anger roiled around the barrel of his chest as he faced the trio and bared his fangs with a warning roar that shook the seams of the prison. We will improve upon the pattern of the ancient terror with elements of our own design. Spirion, gather your acolytes and those best versed in the transmutation logic to prepare the systems and hardware for the process. Murmur, I desire to know every possible path of perfection we can pursue when designing the archetype frame for this beast. We have the means, now we must craft the methods. I want your reports by morning. This requisition has been commissioned directly from the Special Projects Division of House Morningstar, and we will prove their confidence in our facility is not misplaced. At once, Director Pinemont. Sensing the shift in the scene, the lion crouched, his golden pelt stretched tight across the hard clusters of muscles, his great pupils wide. The smells were stronger now, poison and metal and probable pain as he watched the men smile with satisfaction beyond the imprisoning fire. Let us toast then, gentlemen, the success of Project Manticore.
Thanks, Andrew. Andrew is a current member of the 10-month writing program that Irene and I and Ellen Santasero run. There will be a reading of our 8 Smithies, we call them, June 14th, 3 o'clock in this room, and I'll put that on the calendar. Randy's also a veteran of the program there. Okay, so we have Kim Johnson tonight. Kim writes social thrillers tackling some of society's most compelling issues. Her best-selling novel, This Is My America, won numerous accolades. Her second novel, The Invisible Sun, was a 2023 LA Times Book Award finalist. She holds an MFA from Oregon State University Cascades and teaches in the MFA program at Oregon State University Cascades and lives in the Washington, D.C. area. She's going to talk to us about incorporating real-world issues into fiction. And here's Kim.
Gonna set me up.
When Mike asked me about doing a workshop for you all, I did not realize how rich of a resource
this group really is. I mean, I have just been so impressed with all of the presentations and the resources that are there. I mean, it's hard as a writer and trying to find community. So I'm so excited to be here today. My talk is kind of a trick title. If I was to retitle my talk, it really would be how to write fiction, right? Because what is real world fiction? And so, you know, I think that when you're writing fiction, it's the same thing. But there's a different angle, and that the angle that I'll be working with you on that I think is actually relevant to any writer. It's about whatever topic, whatever theme, whatever story that you're writing, you want it to move people. You want characters to be alive and resonate. You don't want them to be flat. You don't want a sort of level of characterization associated with them. And oftentimes that relies on a lot of different ways in which you research and think about your work. And when you write about the topics that I write about, or topics that other writers that are maybe very well known for what we consider inspired by real world fiction, whether it's thinking about something that actually happened in history or thinking about what might happen in the future, it's work that's associated with moving you and having you think about things at a level of awareness that maybe can be challenging for people to perceive it. And when you do that kind of work and you tell those kind of stories, and you know that you likely will receive criticism, or you know that you are touching upon something that really needs care and attention, you want to do it right. Which should be every writer's goal, and I think is every writer's goal. But there's a different sort of layer of the ways to do it. And there's so many different examples, but I felt like I wanted to do books that had red cover titles associated with it. So there's the heavy topics of thinking about real world fiction, and then there's lighter topics of thinking about real world fiction. There's a lot. I write about heavy stuff. We're going to talk about heavy stuff. The other thing that I'm going to do is really kind of go back and forth and helping you think about how to take on a topic that you're writing about. So I'm going to go over my strategies that I use. If I was to do this with a younger group, I would only list like, what are the top 2 key strategies? And I really broke it down more because a lot of it actually is very similar. I'm just saying things in different ways to get your mind moving and thinking about your work in a very iterative process, so that your work is always changing and you're thinking about it in a lot of different ways. So we'll go over the strategies. We'll go over the questions that I use that I think are always really great ways when you're thinking about writing and being in the space of creativity, to ask yourself a lot of questions that will help you go into different kind of rabbit holes, and then pull yourself out of the rabbit hole and really try to hone and focus. And so I'm going to use my latest novel as the sort of example on how to do it. So my novel is called The Color of the Lie. It actually just won the LA Times Book Prize. So so I've been really fortunate being a finalist back-to-back years and actually winning this year. So these are these 7 strategies. The first is, what's your story? So right, you're doing a real world fiction or fiction. You know, where's the inspiration coming from? And so, you know, sometimes as a writer, it hits you. I'm a writer that the story hits me and then I jump into it. But there are times, especially being a published author, the well sometimes is dry, and you have to kind of go on a journey to think about what's inspiring. So, you know, I think for me, that's the first step. The other is that once you sort of get that inspiration, whatever it is really wanting to ground the characters in a particular context, whatever kind of setting and background, because then you can then build in these sort of added layers that are associated with trying to tell a really deep story. I say research deeply. So get lost in the rabbit hole, gather all your information that you need. And research is a very, very broad term, and it completely depends on what topic you're covering. You know, if you're covering something that has science orientation, you're gonna go, you know, into that space. If it's around the environment, you're gonna go into that space. If it's related to history, you're going to do that. If it's a murder mystery and you need to figure out how to melt the body, right? That's gonna be a little research that will call the FBI later, kind of looking at your research history. But you know, there's all different ways of thinking about doing your research. And then when you're sort of, you know, thinking about your research, you want to go back to the characters and you want to think about, okay, you don't want them to be flat characters. What actually shakes your character? What moves your character? Who is this person? So it doesn't feel like, you know, someone that doesn't actually have somewhere that they're trying to go, something that they're trying to achieve, that they have a particular reason in their upbringing, their growing, the society that they're being raised in, that's sort of defining who they are. The other is, again, this is really related, the shaping and not doing a sort of a characterization. I think oftentimes when you are doing work that some people might see, I don't see it as that way, but some people might see it as like, oh, there's an agenda. You have an agenda. You have something that you're passionate about, and so you want to tell a story in a certain way. And the way to be really careful with that is to really think about, you don't want these sort of flat characters that only care about the particular topic that maybe is your theme that you're writing about. You actually want to show them being human in a lot of different ways, because that is the thing that builds the empathy in your story that can reach a broad audience of people that you're reading from. And then leading with empathy is really associated with that. And the last piece, and I'm going to go into what the questions are. I just want to kind of cover the strategies. But the one that I think is most important, especially when you're thinking about real world fiction, topics that maybe are heavy in certain kind of ways, or cause a lot of conversation around your work, or you're challenging particular things, is that how do you balance not writing a book report, telling your story like a book report because it's having a bunch of facts, and actually telling it in a way that you're utilizing setting and dialogue and different sort of elements to be able to express your story. So those are my 7 key strategies, and we're going to go over the question pieces that I think are really helpful. Okay, so at a high level, I think the most is like when you're trying to like pull that story out of the ether, you might already have an idea. I don't know, I'm gonna ask people to kind of raise their hands. Who often, the story just comes to you? How many people the story just comes to you? How many is it? It's a character. It's a character that comes to you first. How many is it plot? There's a plot. What about the ending? Who sees the ending first? Sometimes I see the ending. It's like, okay, how did I get there? When you have that, you still have to have a level of research once you actually get the story, however it comes to you. Because what you might find is the story that pops to you, the story that comes to you, might not actually be the story or the angle in which you tell that particular story. So I'll give an example. My first novel, This Is My America, the main protagonist is a 17-year-old Black girl named Tracy, whose father has been wrongfully incarcerated, and then later her brother is then accused of doing something in his community. And that's the story. That's how the story goes. And so she's the main protagonist. But when the story came to me, the story actually came to me from the brother's perspective. And as I was writing and as I was thinking and doing my research, it really shifted. And so the angle of the story really adapted. And so you might find that happen as you go through some of your research, that your story shifts, the time period shifts, the setting shifts, based on how your story goes. And some of the big questions that I think are so important when you're sort of in that very, very early researching stage and thinking about the stage are these questions about, is there a theme? Who is most impacted in the story? Which sometimes will then tell you who should be the one to tell the story. Because again, it started out as main character with the brother, and the other, came out being actually, no, I think it's the sister is the one who's most impacted in a lot of different ways. She should be the one to tell the story. What's their motivation? What are some of the obstacles that they're doing? And when you're sort of angling and going through and thinking about the researching sort of deeply within yourself about what's going on with the protagonist, that can help you identify what are some sort of added layers of other research and other information that aren't necessarily coming from you that you need to be able to gather. So this is sort of like the first sort of layer of thinking about what's the sort of whole angle. And oftentimes, I'm sure many of you do these sort of character maps, or, you know, some people will use like personality tests to sort of identify, to like help them do that. I've never been like, that's never helped me. like it's too structured in a way. I like my mind to wander, and I like my mind to think about these very big questions about, you know, what are they trying to face? Like, what is going on in their world? What's happening in their nuclear immediate family? What is happening externally in their community? What is happening in the larger society? You know, what's the time period, and what is sort of like pushing the story? Because then that helps me think about how I'll be able to actually tell the story that I'm writing. So I'm showing you some visuals. I like visuals. At the end, I'll show you what I use. It's a Trello board to sort of track all of my projects that I'm working on, where I'll write all my notes, link all my research that I'm doing, where I'm at, any notes that my agent or editor have given me, and then a bunch of visuals that I have. And then anything that's sort of, any books that I've read associated with it, I like to sort of visually see it, because then I kind of feel in that setting. So, so time period, it's 1955. There's some images that are here. This is a, this image right here. Oh, I have the little, this image over here. Yay, this is so exciting. Is a first suburban American homes that were built actually in the late 1940s. So sort of like the mass-produced homes, you know, all the community homes that we think about, right? Was the big sort of like push, the family piece. There's lots of images from 1955. So lots of you have notebooks and pens. I'm just going to have you take a minute or two to think about what would inspire you and seeing these images and thinking about these images of what kind of story you could tell. And this can be bullets, this can be a feel, this can be anything. So I'm going to give you like 2 minutes to kind of brainstorm. Hey, just jot down that last spot. Okay, so if we think about kind of going back to that previous slide, you have a story that comes to you, you have these things that you're exploring, you then get sort of a stronger sense of the time period, sort of what was happening in that space, and then you kind of go off to the races to like get your sort of first idea with the story, right? So we're going to go back to this, but so like keep this thought that you have about this particular budding of a story that you've got kind of working in your brain. And you have that now. And so now we're going to go to the next phase of the key strategies that I like to use. Is like, for me, because it's 1955, I need to know what happened in 1955. I need to start doing my research. And for me, I start my research, and usually it starts with, there's a book, there's an article, there is some kind of foundation piece that then when I'm done with that book, I look at, okay, what did that inspire associated with that? And I start to like sort of build the map of the added resources that I need to figure out about what I'm going to cover. And then when I do that, I go back to my questions because again, it's like I'm trying to create the map of the story in my head before I actually start writing it. This to me also is still an iterative process because there might be different layers that I'm building in or different threads that come in the story that I feel like I don't necessarily have. And so I will come back to it. But I will, when I'm starting to think about researching and doing my work, is did I get enough resources? Did I pull in enough information? And I think that's a really important question to ask yourself is have you done enough research? Is there a perspective or an angle that you really haven't thought about or explored that you might need to dig a little bit deeper into discovering it? And thinking about real world fiction particularly, I define that a lot of thinking about society and the complexity of society. So that's that sort of like added layer in thinking about the story that you're telling. And so these questions are really important in the work that I do. Is what power structures are at play, because how I define my work is, I'm saying real world fiction, but I define my work as I write social thrillers, I write social justice thrillers. So there's always a system or a power structure at play that I'm trying to sort of untangle and understand and think about how to tell the story. So that's how I sort of think about that story. And then how are you sort of delivering that information? Because you've gathered all this information, but then how are you laying down the foundation? Is it something that, you know, you're just telling? You just got the protagonist is just, you know, telling, you know, the reader all of the ways that they view, or are you weaving it into this sort of very subtleties that happen in the way that your main character, what side of town they're on, how they navigate things, the interactions that they have, how they get through town, those kinds of things are the ways that you actually can build in subtle ways, in subtext that aren't necessarily just being sort of a factoid or a book report that you're doing your work. So, so when I'm doing this layer, so now I'm going to show you the next slide of, so we have the slide 1955, American suburban homes. I think the beauty of writing, and I think the fearful thing as a writer is that you want your story to be unique. And you have this like sort of beautiful idea. So you go to this conference and you meet, you know, these agents and you're doing this gong thing and you're telling your pitch of your story. And someone says, yeah, I'm writing about, you know, American suburban homes in 1955. And someone's like, damn it, that's my book, right? That's my story. I'm writing about, oh, I should just give up this story. And the beauty of writing is that everyone's perspective is very different. So I'd love to hear just from a couple of hands, raise your hand, and I'd love to hear from some mouths of what did that 1955, what did that imagery pop up for folks? Is there a few folks who, yes, please.
For me, it popped up movies rather than like books.
Yeah, so it popped up movies.
Yeah, like Little Shop of Horrors, the goal was to get somewhere that's green. And those kind of movies in Back in the Future where they show you where they started building the place where they live, and it's all those kind of homes, or Privet Drive in Harry Potter. I mean, that's what it reminded me of. Yeah. You know, those kind of things, movies for more so than books.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna repeat it just so that the recording can say it, but it inspired, you know, movies, thinking about Little Shop of Horrors, Back to the Future, sort of coming back to a place, sort of created a sort of visual imagery of things. What about someone else? Go ahead and then over there.
Well, the first thing for me is our first house was really old like that, and we lived in beautiful downtown Burbank in LA.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that just could have been our neighborhood. So it brought back all kinds of memories, even though, you know, it was a really old house, even when we lived there, and it still stands there. So kind of what I was thinking of is houses in 1955 that last all the way through and have generations of different people with society seeing all kinds of different things and the movement, because the only thing that's constant in life is that everything's always changing, right? So that was kind of what I was thinking of, this house that we lived in, that we were kind of somewhere in the middle, and now people still live in that same house that was our first house 30 years ago.
Yeah, so just invoking a sense of reminiscing. When you were talking about how, it was a home that was built, in Burbank during that time period. And so many other generations have lived there. My brain automatically went to sort of storytelling of writing a book from the perspective of the house
Yeah.
and the people who come. And so that a story could be like 1955 and it's really the home, and the home is the fact of speaking and telling the story of the people that are coming, which would be very
And
different
how
than
the people
that.
change from that live there, how the people
Yeah.
change and how they talk differently and how, yeah, so that's kind of where my mind went.
Yeah, and then over here.
Yeah, I was alive and working during that time. And I built one of those
Oh my gosh.
tracks.
Yeah.
Right, I had a superintendent, a foreman, and me, I was the laborer. And we built a house a day.
Mhm.
Obviously, we subcontracted out everything, but just how it all worked and the relationship that I had between the superintendent, the foreman, and all the subcontractors was extremely complex. And, I feel right at home in that environment because, those were the formative years of my life.
Yeah,
And it's all, I already have the story in my head.
yeah, and so that just invoked even for
I don't have to
for you,
research anything.
it didn't have to, it was your experience actually having built homes during that time period.
Right out of my experience. And the other issue is because you're showing the tract. And what I'm talking about is how you actually built these tracks. The technical issues, the whole mechanics of how that integrated in society. And that thing that people don't understand, that right there are three generations. There's a generation of people who survived the Great Depression and the veterans from World War I. Then there are the people coming back from World War II
Yeah.
with their, with all the chaos that was World War II, that none of, it's hard for people who haven't lived through that to imagine. And then the people who were born right there just before the war and who are growing up in this kind of economic paradise. Because the United States during this period was producing about 80%, maybe 75% of the industrial output of the entire world, because China and Japan had been destroyed, and so had Europe. And so the United States was this economic giant.
You got a whole memoir out of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a complex thing to deal with.
Yeah, and I just want to repeat it for the camera, just invoking really understanding of the actual time period of the, Depression era, World War II, those that will return to World War II. And this is so gonna be great for my next slide because it's such a great transition. But I see a hand in the back, and that'll be the last one.
I
Yes.
can relate a lot as an urban planner because 1955 brings up a village concept. I think as I've gotten older and look back, I realized I was in my village of what you described. We were unified by media. We were unified by our radius technology, the walking, the one-car families. But we were also very disassociated by the other villages because there was such a dominant media. And so I think there was a lot in common in 1955 with the village structures because of the economics and technologies from cars to media, radios, televisions, telephones. But we were so limited in our understanding that other villages were not like ours.
Yeah, so just a sense of how those communities created villages that were connected with each other, but then not connected with those that are.
I felt
are
like
outside.
a lot of completeness,
Mhm.
but separate.
Yeah, and I do want to, I do want to move on to the next slide, because again, this is the beauty of real work. The imagery invoke different angles and perspectives. And so the perspective that I'm going to show you is the next slide of how does it make you think about the story differently when you see these images. So we have 1954 was Brown v. Board, Supreme Court Brown v. Board, where it was separate but equal. Didn't go, it was not the thing. And how many communities were terrified at integration, or what integration would be. This is an older image. I think we know the image of Ruby Bridges, which is more like in the 1960s of sort of being brought in by protection, being the only Black girl going into her school for the first time. These are soldiers from World War II. So the first deploying of soldiers, but these are specifically Black soldiers who went away internationally to fight fascism, right? And then they returned. And then what you have is this imagery at the top, which actually is imagery of what was called the Great Migration, which is the Black community from the South, post-slavery, thinking about the Jim Crow era, really trying to get out and uproot out of this opportunity, because we were in the Industrial Revolution. We were factories and companies, and there was so much opportunity in big cities, right? And so what did this cause? It caused opportunity for some communities, for these Black soldiers who were fighting fascism. They came to the US like, yay, we're united, we fight fascism. And they were treated the same when they returned. They didn't actually have access to the GI Bill and the Veteran Bill that provided the loans that you actually could buy these brand new tract homes. They actually didn't have access to those things. So in this angle, which is the angle of the story that I told in The Color of the Lie, how does this imagery now shift your thinking on the story that was creating? And or what are now the questions that you might need to research because of this new information? So I'm just going to have you just jot down. I see a hand. Do you go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, I can.
Oh, okay. Okay, we'll have you wait. We'll just jot down 2 minutes. What are the new questions that you need to explore? What are maybe the new angles of research that you might need? How does this shape the story that you're thinking in a different way? And you just jot down that last thought. Yeah, please.
This was actually the story I wrote down the first time. You guys didn't write anything new this time. It's
Awesome.
just benign suburbs versus what I now know about planning for opportunity, I remember, I don't know, 5 or 10 years ago, reading about redlining in Seattle and just being disappointed that I didn't ever know that before. I was never taught, and that these soldiers didn't have access to the same GI bills. And so now that I know that, anytime I see those benign looking 50 suburbs, it's just sort of this dichotomy that I can't sort of reconcile. That's what's left of me. That would invariably be the story I would have to write about it. Even if I don't like it, it makes me uncomfortable, but that's just how I see it.
Yeah, so he just shared that this is the kind of thinking already in terms of seeing the first picture because of awareness of what redlining has done to different communities and who has access to them and who historically has had and has access to them. You had your hand, did you want me earlier?
Images kind of, what I kept seeing was the very first thing on the top left was things money can't buy. And I immediately thought, there's no cost. What was the cost? Cost somebody something. And it's still costing us, right? Like you were talking about a village. For me, I kind of actually saw like this disconnect of these like far off communities and not connected to our food, not connected to things that are made. And then I think about too, then things money can't buy, and it brings me to the current situation and the expectation that when I was your age, I had a house and 3 people at home and we're working and 2 cars and I think, yeah, that's not the reality at all now. That shouldn't be the expectation at all. The financials are completely different than what they were then. So that things money can't buy, just that phrasing just put me off, and I think it relates to this. There are costs.
Yeah, so that phrasing in the first image, it said things that money can't buy. What was the cost to that? Is there another?
So the first one I wrote about, those houses were kind of the first modern kitchen to bring women back from the workforce and put them in the house. And so that kind of started that. And then processed foods and all that kind of stuff. But then with the second set, it was like, I don't know what happened in the South. I don't know what happened with Black women in the industrial part when men were at war. I don't know. These are all these questions I don't know. And also I wrote down about, because my grandparents were too, the misery inside the house, but the happy outside the house, just like define. The other thing I thought of was this was a direct line to the 60s. And I don't know what the rest of the dots are. And I want more dots.
Yeah, so it's just lots of questions that it brought up. Especially thinking about World War II, when there was a lot of boom, there was a lot of opportunity, and when most of the men were away in the war, women actually were part of working and doing stuff, and then that sort of independence in that way flipped, and so sort of those expectations and thinking about then like what had that leaving the 60s and so forth. Maybe time for one more. I think I saw a hand there. Go ahead.
So like others, I had these images before saw this. I didn't have the same feelings about the Council Village community. I thought it's a story with layers, and the image America has of itself, or that is promoted by people who really are just out looking for a profit. So they promote this image that is going to sell things to certain people. And I thought, who isn't in this picture? Because it was just this white family and white family in a certain class. And there's so many that aren't in that picture. And then I thought about the other things that happened that would sort of lead up that really impacted, like the way that the transit and public transit systems was really destroyed. And this meant it was very much more difficult for people who didn't have the ability to buy a car to get where they needed to go. And it also impacted the cities and ended up with isolation of communities of suburbs because of the freeways around them. I mean, if you don't have a car, you're really isolated in how you cross those big streets and, yeah, so that's the kind of thing that brought up with me, and this is just, yeah, this is a huge. The other part of the story is what's happening with the people who are in that.
Yeah, so just invoking more, I think more questions about who isn't in the picture, the impact of transportation, which, you know, if you want to go down that rabbit hole, is a pretty amazing research about where freeways are placed and historically the impact of how that pulls people away from access to opportunity. One more in the back end.
The more I look at these images, I'm struck by your people were migrating out of states, sort of ill-defined work, ill-defined cities, ill-defined skill, very large scale thinking to cities, which are very specific, different color heroes. I assume that means something somewhere. But I'm wondering more why certain cities and this, I feel like my grandparents, some came as immigrants from other countries because there were some other people and jobs, but when you're coming from within the country, are you going towards jobs that come from city to city that isn't shown, or are they just showing up because they hear there's jobs and there's someone you know? So I think for me, as I look at this, the migration of the attractions is hard for me to scale. Something that's shifted in terms of identity from a large community to these specific places.
Yeah, just, you know, I think it's the dichotomy example that I'm really trying to show is whenever we're thinking about fiction in our story is we have our story, and whatever the story that you're wanting to tell, that's the story that you should tell. And you're creating though characters, protagonists, context, and understanding what those are and what are happening. And I think it's like a great example if someone doesn't really do a lot of their research. You might be writing in a particular town in 1964, and you don't cover major things that happened in 1964 that shook the world, or 1967. Just being an awareness about what those things are. It doesn't mean necessarily that it's going to change your story or what you're trying to write, but it is a way of thinking about your writing as an onion and all the different layers and angles. And if you can find something that is incredibly untapped, I guess, in a way that isn't touched upon, that maybe isn't even the main theme or the main setting of your story, but you're providing some realness to that perspective, it really makes for rich stories that have different kinds of angles. So, you know, mine is, this is what I'm passionate about, this is what I write about, but you all have different ways in terms of how you think about it. And it's just the questions, right? All the added questions that you have that will help you get into your rabbit hole to pull you back into whatever story that you wanted to write. So I'm going to continue on with the key strategies, again, using my work as a model, a model to it. So now that you know more about the characters, you know more about the angle or at least the perspectives, how you might want to incorporate it. You then want to really go back to the character, because really mostly likely the work that you're doing is around a protagonist in some way that you don't want to be flat. And so now you know more about this main character, this main sort of story that you're telling. Where do they come from, right? So a little bit more that can help you think about enriching the character and how they interact with the people around them, their nuclear family, their extended, their community, how it makes their decision making and all those kinds of things that come with it. not wanting to be sort of what goes into some of the later stuff, but when you don't want to write a story that feels like the main character only cares about the one thing, whatever that one thing is. It could be trying to find a partner, or the person's an environmentalist, or they're trying to shake down a corporation, or, yes, that's an important piece about like what the sort of inciting incident and the arc that your main character is trying to go on, but they have other things that they're passionate about. What is their personality? And the deeper you get into it and understand what their fears are, how they make decisions, again, kind of going back to that character map, it can allow you to write a deeper story. And I'm going to kind of move a little fast. I just want to have time for questions. And so with my character, my story is about a Black family with a father who was a World War II vet who came back from Chicago and tried to integrate into an all-Black community, and it went disastrously, it went horribly. And he felt like he wanted a piece of the American pie. He wanted that American dream. And his family was actually light enough that they actually could pass as white. And so the father in my story decided to move his family to Levittown, Pennsylvania, in the first sub-community, the American suburban dream homes, because he wanted that American dream. He was a vet and he wanted to build that home, but he forced his son to pass as white. And that's the sort of the dichotomy that's playing. So my main character is a 17-year-old Black boy who's always had the identity of being a Black boy, is now forced to not be a Black boy anymore, and he cannot sort of expose who he is. And so that sort of draws deeper into like, what is my character's fears? What is at risk? What is he losing? What is happening? This is a picture. So again, doing my research, this is a picture from 1957 in Levittown, Pennsylvania, where the Myers family was the first Black family that moved into Levittown, Pennsylvania. And these are all the neighbors and community that harassed their home, thousands in the droves, actually, because they did not want them in their neighborhood. And so that helped me think about certain scenes in my story. And the 1955, the end of 1955 is where Rosa Parks did her first sort of boycott. So there's all these sort of like key time period things that were really critical for my story to invoke. So pulling real world things that were happening, using them as scenes in the story, but allowing some sense of creating a new story with a new sort of angle and thinking about the work. And when you're going through your research, you might find these little nuggets of inspiration that help you think about your story, whether you sort of take it loosely or it sort of inspires a new thought. That's really what will help you think about your characters in a lot of different ways when you can kind of think about your story in a deeper kind of way. I'm just gonna like put this really quickly because I want to sort of get to the last slides and give a space for questions. But at the end of the day, for me, it's about empathy and creating heart in a story, whatever you're writing, because that's actually what moves people and has people dig deeply into your work. And so, I just shared a whole bunch of heavy themes, right? But I don't want people to read my main character and see him as someone who's just dealing with a bunch of issues. I want people to see my character as a young boy who just wants to have friends, just wants to be himself, doesn't want to have to lie about who he is, and he has to figure out, am I going to be me or am I going to do what my dad's going to do? And that's a coming of age story. and you have to build in those things. And because I write YA, there are those sort of like thematic things that you want to cover with whatever you're deciding on, is those kind of decisions that young person makes in the story. And as you think about your story, if it's an adventure story or a fantasy story or whatever sort of genre kind of related kind of thing is, you want to think about how are you infusing that even when you're having influences of real pieces that might actually have heavy issues or might have a sort of you're taking down the patriarchy or whatever you're sort of tackling in your story, how do you sort of balance that? So this, this is just a ideation process. I try to like think about time periods. I try to think about issues and thematic things. They help me think about research. And then I think about inspirations, reading books that are within that time period, within the vein of that time period, or have sort of thematic areas, nonfiction, fiction, and helping me think about that, because I was writing a story about a family that was passing, reading lots of books that are on passing. So really sort of like kind of documenting that is really helpful for me to think about my story. And I have a Trello board where I track everything in my story. It's free if you like visual stuff. I always have like so because it was 1955, I needed a calendar. So when I'm writing, it was really easy for me to think about, okay, did that happen on a Sunday? And I need to make sure that if there's something major in history that happened, that they actually address it. That's something really important when you're writing historical fiction, is that if JFK died on that day and you're just writing your book and there's no mention of JFK passing, he didn't pass it. But like, just an example, like that would be a big error, if the Bay of Pigs is going on and you're not talking about it in your work in that time period, you're going to have the people who have no idea, and you have the other people who are going to write you the email that says, hello, you did not address this, particular piece. I always put pictures of my characters, again, trying to be visual, who my characters are, these things I'm grappling with, my revision plan, my agent notes. This goes on. I mean, you can make as many slides as you want, but I'll have links of books and other kinds of things to kind of keep my thinking together. And then I'm just going to read you just a couple examples of how I took issues and tried to like create moments where I'm not doing a full chapter that's had the heavy hitting pieces, but I'm explaining stuff. So this is a scene from the book. Again, the main character is a 17-year-old, but this is actually the father speaking. And you don't want to have characters that aren't in depth. It'd be easy to make the father this terrible character of how could he force his son to strip away everything that he knows and live in this lie, right? Like there's got to be a reason, right? And as a writer, even with a villain, the father's not the villain, but like even when you're writing a villain, if they're just kind of like, like that kind of character, like, I'm a bad guy, it's going to fall really flat. And you really want to have something much deeper. And so I took all of that research that I did about World War II, the Great Migration, all of those pieces. And I just have this very, very simple scene that doesn't take up a lot of space in this particular chapter that tells you the father's story. And I'll go ahead and read it and look at it. Calvin, there's no hope for us. Our history is we've been slaves longer than we've been Americans. And we're now told you're free, be off and make it, as long as we stay within glass walls. My father turned his glass over and covered a spider crawling on the table. I watched the spider freeze, then work to escape, gliding up the glass and back down to the table, stuck with nowhere to go. We're as helpless as the spider. We can see freedom, we can see opportunity, but we have this glass ceiling, these glass walls. Dad picked up the glass and the spider scurried away. What I did is simply remove the glass, remove the man-made barrier, the construct of race. So son, I'm not saying you have to hate who you are. I just want you to have a chance to see what it's like when that glass isn't controlling you. Now that doesn't mean that you have to agree with the father's decision, but it puts all the context, like all that research that I was doing, in a really approachable way so that my audience, it is adult and young adult, but I'm writing as a teen, young adult, how can they kind of maybe understand that? The other example is when I was talking about what shapes the character, how do you have empathy and not sort of agenda? And it has to be that there's more to the main character. So in this particular scene, I'm bringing in a lot of moments in a really, really short scene. One of the themes that I'm bringing in is that the main character plays a trumpet and he loves playing jazz. And In the story, his father has refused for him to play jazz because he's so afraid that his son will start playing Miles Davis and John Coltrane and other kinds of Black artists. And so even though anyone really can play the trumpet, his father was still so fearful he didn't allow. And that is like his passion and love. It also is seen where there's something happening that happened around race in this particular story that was traumatic that I didn't actually want on the page. And so I used something very symbolic. And so Strange Fruit has that, which is a song, has that very, very symbolic cultural context around the lynching of Black people that people often know is the reason why that song is there. But why that song, the inspiration of that particular song, without me actually having to put all that trauma on the page, and create a very intimate moment with his crush, which is Lily. So I'm just gonna read this particular scene. We're quiet again, waiting each other out. I couldn't take it any longer. I formed my lips and zipped a tune in and out, letting the vibration of my breath dictate a sound. Lily looked at me and laughed, but I didn't stop. I knew she loved Billie Holiday, and all I could think of was Bobo, how his life had been unjustly taken. I began the intro, pushing out the sound for Strange Fruit. I caught the flicker in Lily's eyes when she realized what I was setting her up for. I ran through it again with my lips, buzzing through my mouth and releasing a sound like my horn would play. Then I paused as Lily began. Southern trees bear a strange fruit, blood on the leaves. And again, he's a kid. There's big things happening. He's scared. There's things that are being taken away from him. A traumatic thing has happened with somebody that he knows, but he can't talk about it at his school because if he shows that he cares about what happened to Bobo, which Bobo is Emmett Till, it will ruin everything because people will know who he is. And so when you're writing your work, it doesn't always have to hit it on the head. And you don't have to have chapters and chapters of exposition telling all these things that are happening. You can find those moments that you can pull in that history, whether that's what takes up your novel or whether that's a secondary character in an interaction that your main character has with someone else in a particular story. So I hope those examples were really helpful. We don't have time for the prompt, but the prompt I was gonna do was just give you a article. I went to the Bend Bulletin today and I was like, let me pick what's happening in the community of an article. And it was an article about environmentalists argue Pacific Core's wildfire liability. And so it's going to be this article of a real world thing that's happening. And I was going to have you write about 10 minutes on from the perspective of if you were to think about this particular news article, pick an angle of how you would tell it from a utility executive, a community member affected by the wildfires, or an environmental activist. So that was going to be the exercise, but we ran. I talked too much. I always talk too much. So thank you so much for your time, and I'm here to take any questions.
You didn't happen to bring any of those, The Color of the Lie, with you, did you?
No, I don't. It is that they do have copies at Roundabout Books, and they might have a copy here in the library. I actually didn't check, but yeah, I don't have it. But you can pick it up anywhere at any stores.
But I thought if I could get it here, I have to sign it.
Yeah. No questions? I know it's a long night. Okay.
I had a question
Yeah.
about how you said you changed. And you were thinking about your story, and at first it was the girl, and then or at first it was you switched perspectives along the way. How do you not get attached to the voice for this? No, I mean.
Yeah, so the question was just kind of regarding my switching perspectives of the story from my first sort of initial story and not sort of holding on to that. And I'll actually use a different example to help you. When I thought of The Color of the Lie, the story actually came to me present contemporary story. And it was a story about a girl whose mother went missing and she went back down to her home town in Levittown. And she had to sort of discover what happened to her mom, which led to the big secret in the family, which was about a family that was passing. And so I was like, I can't wait to write this current contemporary story with these big secrets that are, digging back through. And then I shared it with my editor, and my editor was like, that's a really great story, but I really think the story is the grandfather, which is Calvin, the main character in the story. And I was like, I don't write historical. That is, I write contemporary, contemporary pressing issues in society. And it took me a while to really think about that. And she was like, you don't have to, but think about that. And that story actually took me a really long time to get to. So I had the space and time. I actually had to pull myself away from the story and keep it in, keep the story that's going and just be like, I'm just gonna play. And if you tell yourself you're gonna play and you're gonna jump into it, the story will take you. It'll take you in the direction it's supposed to go. And when I played a lot. And I know I was supposed to play a lot because when I was still trying to figure out the story, I was trying to figure out what Levittown community I was going to write about, because there's several different Levittown communities, but there's 3 major Levittown communities. And I didn't want to write about the one in Pennsylvania because it already had a lot of stories and other things associated with it. I was like, oh, let me write about the one in Long Island. So I wrote that story. And then I found out that my first novel was being challenged in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. And there was a school district fight, and students were trying to fight to have my book still be in that. They wanted to be part of the curriculum, but there was outside Moms of Liberty community came in and were picking books to challenge. And my book was one of them. And so I was like, what's up with Bucks County, Pennsylvania? Because I'd never heard it before. And I did my research and found out that actually Levittown, Pennsylvania is in Bucks County. And I'm an activist writer. That is the identity that I take up. That is my purpose. I feel like that is my purpose to do. And I felt like, I'm supposed to bring light to this story. So sometimes when I'm supposed to bring light to a story in a place that doesn't want history to be told, let me tell them their history that's there. So sometimes when you are trying to you're stuck on a way, if you step away from it and play, sometimes things will move and come to you in different ways. And it might not come right when you want it to come. What's that? God's gonna come on time. Just kidding, I'm not a pastor. But the story will come to you when it's supposed to come to you. So you have to sometimes let those darlings go away. And sometimes also what that will do when you're playing is that the right thing might have been your original concept, but the playing allows you to have a deeper sense of the story and perspective that maybe you wouldn't have had before.
And when you talk about playing, what are you talking about journaling about it and like just playing with scenes, writing it? What's your definition of playing?
If you say play, then you feel like you're not making a life-changing decision, changing your story. So
So you're just writing and seeing what comes out.
Yeah. Okay. And sometimes it will be. Sometimes they will actually have to step away from the computer and will journal. I do journal a lot, and when I do that, or I create a new document, because sometimes it's really hard to change something within a document, and you're like, how can I even change act 2 of my book, right? And so then I'll just create a new document, and I just call it playing, because then it doesn't feel like I'm making a major decision and wasting my time, right? So, yeah. Question in the back.
So I may have missed some of the mechanics, but, so I apologize. Talk offline. I couldn't think for the first part. But so Trello you use for kind of conceptual bulletin board, is that correct? And then what programs are you writing and playing in as you're letting things, kind of be a creation and then simmering these parts? Is it Word or?
Yeah, so I use Word. I've tried the Scrivener. I've tried Storyist. I've tried those others, it's just too complicated for me, I just can't, it's too much, I've tried many things and I just write in Word. I typically just write in Word. And then Trello is just my organization idea board. And so I have all my books, all my ideas. So every single book I have a Trello board that I can click on and it has all of that. And then it has a place for me for any idea that comes to me. When I'm working on a project, I know I'm not supposed to be doing other things. And so that will allow me to like give that idea, put some visuals really quickly so that I don't lose the story. And I feel like it's there when I'm ready to tackle it. And then I make sure that I'm focusing on the story I'm supposed to do. So, and Trello board is really intuitive. It's not as, for me, I feel like that other stuff is too complicated, but this is like an easy board that you create, so.
I have a question from Leah on Zoom. How do you navigate readers' responses to your topics when they have different perspectives or are triggered? Does that cause you to filter your writing process?
Well, yeah, really good question. You know, it doesn't change my process. I think if someone writes something really thoughtful and they have a perspective that they want to share, I always will look at it and I always will sort of consider. I have no patience for anything that's really hateful. I just, because I know what I'm writing and I know my work is it can be challenging. Especially because it's often perspectives that often haven't been shared. And so I know that I'm going to get a triggering response in some ways. And oftentimes a lot of those reviews though that I get are people who actually haven't read my work. Because I have senior elder community homes who email me and say, your book was amazing and we had a book club in it. You know, it's not just teens reading my book. I know, you know, so it's like when I get those reviews. I think right now, in particular, if you're writing on topics that seem to be challenged, there's a lot of book bans and challenges and sort of controlling, you know, those pieces. I think you just have to think about what is your purpose as a writer. You know, there's some people who are called to write about what's important to them or passionate about them or whatever that story is. And I think it's important to stay with it because there will be agents and publishers and people who want to read that work. You know, I mean, like John Steinbeck's work, people didn't want that. Kurt Vonnegut's work, people didn't want that. So George Orwell, I mean, all of these, you know, throughout time, if you look at Tolstoy, like if you really look at like the time period in which you're writing in, those are all challenging political time periods, writing about things that through the test of time have value. So I don't think you can kind of look at now about what's happening and you just have to kind of pursue and then just don't read the reviews and if it really actually impacts you. I'm trying to look at the camera. Yeah.
So you call yourself an activist writer, and I'm wondering, are you writing for everybody? Are you writing for Black people or for white people? I mean, can you explain it?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm writing for everyone and anyone who's willing to read my work. But I think it's just like we're writing any genre. If you're writing a fantasy book, you're writing for fantasy readers. You want other people to read your work, but you're going to write for a fantasy, sci-fi, dystopia, whatever that, vampires. You know, you're writing a vampire book. My main audience is going to be people who like to read vampire books, right? But you want other people to read your vampire book, right? And so I always think about what's the impact I'm having on the immediate community, which is I write Black characters. I write about the Black experience from the Black perspective. As best as I can in different ways, because I think that we're not a monolith. That is my primary because I don't want to do any harm and hurt to that particular community. But I write about communities. You know, I grew up in Eugene, Oregon. I've been surrounded around different kinds of communities my whole life. And I'm touching on that, but I'm not going to soften my work for readers who actually will never, never is harsh, you never know, right? There's always hope for everyone, who will never actually agree with what I'm writing. There's not even a willingness to even read the work and have a perspective, and I can't worry about, I'm not gonna worry about that particular population. So, because it just waters down the work and actually isn't what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to appeal to every, as a writer, you can't appeal to everyone. You cannot. You cannot. Go to your favorite, I'm sure you've heard this before, go to your favorite book and go on Goodreads and read all the 1-star reviews on your favorite book. You know, you're not gonna appeal to everybody.
Else? All right, Kim, thank you very much. Well, as Kim pointed out, the those 7 strategies that she has there are actually if you dig into them, it's actually just how to write fiction. Really, really good detail in there. So I will post those that slideshow soon as I get the recording from the library, which usually happens pretty quick. We'll get that on the website, but that's all you ever need to write. So you don't ever have to come back here. I'm kidding. But I really appreciate that. Good information and good explanation, good example of how to use all that. Really, really great job. Next month, so Saturday, BOLA haiku workshop, still some room in that. And then next month, Laura Stanfill is going to talk about revision. Oh my gosh, I just had it and I was just looking at it. But Laura's going to do a presentation and a workshop. The workshop is "What's your book about?" and basically the presentation is good writing is rewriting. So be here for that. And those of us in the room, we're gonna go eat all that great food that Amanda brought. And those of you at home just have to eat your own food. Thank you everyone for coming, and
But we're still glad you're
see
online.
you next week. Yeah, thanks for coming. All right, thanks everybody.